Rick Harrison, a familiar face in the world of global reality television, has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This verdict was handed down by a federal court in early 2025, officially closing one of the most controversial trials in American television history. Once a celebrated TV icon, Rick has now become a federal inmate facing a series of unforgivable and serious charges. Influence and constant public attention, Rick Harrison is now confronting a harsh new reality. Each day spent confined in a cramped prison cell, each night a lonely battle against illness, isolation, and the downfall of a once famous name. What is really happening behind the cold walls of the prison where he's being held? Is there still a chance for him to start over, or have all doors permanently closed? Stay tuned until the end of the video to uncover the truth behind this harsh sentence and step into an untold journey, the miserable life of Rick Harrison behind bars. 1. The road to a life sentence. Once regarded as a living symbol of American pop culture, Rick Harrison embodied the American dream, a man who built his empire from scratch, transforming a modest pawn shop in Las Vegas into a global hub for reality television. With Pawn Stars, he didn't just create a hit show, he turned seemingly worthless objects into cultural treasures, each carrying an engaging historical story. Viewers were captivated not only by the dramatic negotiations, but also by Rick's sharp intellect and deep knowledge displayed in every transaction. Rick's success didn't come overnight. He began his journey in 1981 alongside his father, Richard "Old Man" Harrison, when the family moved to Las Vegas to open the gold and silver coin shop. Initially, the store specialized in coins and precious metals. However, Rick soon recognized a deeper potential. Old items weren't just physically valuable, they also carried cultural significance. From there, he expanded the business, buying all kinds of antiques, from vintage watches and paintings to military documents and war memorabilia. This keen business sense laid the foundation for Pawn Stars, which premiered in 2009 on the History Channel. Pawn Stars quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The show blended entertainment with education, Chumlee's comic relief, generational clashes within the Harrison family, and, most importantly, Rick's role as the cool-headed mediator who assessed items using both logic and experience. With his calm voice, broad knowledge, and wise demeanor, Rick was seen as an unofficial history teacher for America. Yet, even at the peak of his fame, cracks in the facade began to appear. As the show gained popularity, questions started emerging about the origin of the items being sold. Were they all obtained legally? Some historians began to express concerns when a few artifacts showed unclear provenance or appeared significantly undervalued, raising suspicions that their true worth might be deliberately concealed for profit. Rick repeatedly denied these allegations, insisting that every item had been thoroughly vetted by experts. However, his reassurances did little to dispel the growing skepticism within the heritage conservation community. The turning point came in mid-2023 when a covert investigation jointly conducted by the FBI and IRS was officially announced. Rick Harrison, along with his store's management team, was placed under investigation for a case involving the illegal trade of cultural artifacts, large-scale tax evasion, and money laundering through an antique dealing network. The months-long investigation culminated in a dramatic raid on both the gold and silver pawn shop and Rick's private residence in Las Vegas. At the scene, authorities seized hundreds of artifacts with unclear origins, a server containing confidential transaction data, and a dual bookkeeping system used to separately record undisclosed dealings. The root of the case was traced back to a former employee who had resigned, but later provided internal evidence and admitted that Rick had once instructed the alteration of paperwork to make stolen items appear as if they came from legal donations or public auctions. In addition, several artifacts were confirmed to have once belonged to museums or universities in Europe, but had disappeared in art thefts that occurred years ago. Investigators believe Rick did not directly participate in these heists, but he had turned a blind eye to suspicious signs from intermediary suppliers, driven by a desire to acquire rare items and reap large profits from the international collectibles market. Rick Harrison's trial lasted nearly a year, involving numerous witnesses, including financial experts, cultural heritage specialists, and former staff, who testified in court. A series of evidence was presented: encrypted emails, covert financial transactions, audio recordings of conversations, and most notably, a surveillance video from a hidden storage facility where the artifacts were concealed. Rick and his defense attorney argued that he was not directly involved, claiming that the violations were due to oversights in the company's internal control process. However, faced with overwhelming and convincing evidence, the jury remained unconvinced. In early 2025, Rick was officially sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, with the main charges being tax evasion, money laundering, possession and trafficking of stolen artifacts, and falsifying transaction records. The court declared that the sentence was not only a punishment for personal misconduct, but also a stern warning to the entire heritage trade industry that the pursuit of profit at the expense of cultural values would never be tolerated. The verdict sparked heated debate. One side viewed it as justice served with integrity, while the other believed Rick was made a scapegoat for a system in need of an example to deter future misconduct. Regardless of perspective, the journey from a national icon to a convicted felon serving a life sentence had reached its end. And from that moment on, Rick Harrison entered a completely different world, one where all privileges and fame were stripped away, where the name Pawn Stars was no longer a ticket to public admiration, but a lasting stain in a federal criminal record. 2. A difficult life behind bars. According to documents from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, BOP, Rick was transferred to the Federal Correctional Institution, Victorville Medium 2, located in California. This is one of the prominent medium security facilities, designed to house nearly 1,300 inmates. It primarily holds individuals convicted of nonviolent offenses with serious financial implications, federal violations, or those with significant societal impact, aligning with Rick's charges, which include tax evasion, international artifact smuggling, illegal possession of antiquities, and large-scale money laundering. Under BOP's classification system, Rick is categorized as a high-profile white-collar crime offender. This means he is not entitled to any privileges, regardless of his previous fame or social status. At FCI, all inmates are strictly monitored under standard procedures: 24/7 surveillance through security cameras, random body searches, and heavily restricted communication with the outside world. Rick was assigned to a standard prison cell measuring approximately 6 square meters, about 2.5 meter by 2. Form, which contains a metal bunk bed, a wall-mounted stainless steel desk, a combined sink unit, and an open toilet without partitions. Each day, inmates are allowed about 2 hours of outdoor exercise within a fenced area, while the rest of the time is spent in the cell or participating in rehabilitation or educational programs. Meals are served 3 times a day, totaling around 2,800 kilocalories, consisting mainly of frozen foods, canned vegetables, and a low portion of meat. Reports from federal prison systems indicate that 92% of inmates at FCI have complained about poor nutritional quality and hygiene in the food. The daily routine starts at 6 a.m. with a roll call bell, followed by breakfast in the main cafeteria, then assigned labor, classes, or group rehabilitation sessions. In the evening, all inmates must return to their cells by 9 p.m. and remain inside until the next morning. During the initial phase, Rick was assigned to light-duty tasks, such as assisting in the prison library, organizing rehabilitation files, or drafting internal documents based on his skills and background. According to prison staff, Rick complied well with regulations, showed no signs of resistance or disciplinary issues, but generally remained quiet and socially withdrawn. Due to his history of epilepsy, which has been publicly mentioned multiple times on episodes of Pawn Stars, Rick was placed in the medical care level 2 category, meaning he requires ongoing medical supervision. This allows him to receive monthly checkups, access anti-seizure medication, and contact medical personnel in case of emergencies. According to BOP statistics from 2024, only about 8.7% of federal inmates are over the age of 60, and among them, just 1% have chronic conditions that require continuous monitoring. Rick falls into this rare category, which means he must be closely watched, especially in a high-stress prison environment like FCI. In internal reports accessed by the media, Rick was noted to show signs of anxiety, mild sleep disturbances, and a generally withdrawn demeanor, especially during the first 2 months following his incarceration. However, there were no indications of self-harm or symptoms of severe psychological disorders. Medical staff recommended that he join a mental health support group for elderly inmates, but Rick declined to participate during the initial stage. Victorville Medium Sue. Correctional facility houses not only individuals convicted of financial crimes, but also those involved in arms trafficking, international money laundering, and certain violent offenders who had been transferred from high-security prisons. As a result, the living environment is not entirely safe, particularly for inmates with public notoriety like Rick. According to the prison's security experts, high-profile inmates are more likely to become targets in 3 main ways. They may be harassed by others seeking to gain status within the prison community. They may be threatened in attempts to extract information or force financial transactions through outside channels. They may be isolated for being perceived as outsiders. Rick was advised by prison staff to keep his personal background private, avoid contact with organized inmate groups, and refrain from participating in unsupervised activities during off hours. Although no incidents occurred during the first 3 months, the housing unit's management maintained a heightened level of vigilance. Once a businessman with full control over his operations, Rick Harrison is now having to adjust to the complete loss of autonomy over his schedule, personal decisions, and everyday choices. Every aspect of life in prison, from mealtimes and food selection to time spent in the yard, is strictly dictated by the institution's regulations, with no exceptions. In a routine report concerning high-profile inmates, Rick was noted to be an active reader, primarily focusing on U.S. history, entrepreneur biographies, basic criminal law, and criminal psychology. He also began keeping a journal, though not made public, which, according to one officer, was introspective and showed signs of self-reflection regarding his mistakes. Some fellow inmates in the same unit described Rick as polite, quiet, and unpretentious. During group activities, he typically observed more than participated, occasionally sharing insights on negotiation techniques and the valuation of antiques, but he consistently avoided discussing his charges or legal case. Rick Harrison's legal representative filed an appeal in the second quarter of 2025, arguing that a life sentence was excessively harsh for a non-violent offense and failed to take into account his prior contributions to society. However, by the end of 2025, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had yet to deliver a final ruling. According to statistics from the U.S. Department of Justice, the success rate for federal life sentence appeals has remained below 1.5% over the past decade. 3. The collapse of Rick Harrison's empire. Immediately after the court issued its final ruling, the History Channel, the network that owns the rights and is responsible for airing Pawn Stars, officially announced the termination of its contract with Rick Harrison and the entire team involved. All episodes of the show were removed from History Channel's streaming platform, as well as from international distribution channels such as Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime. The reason given for this decision was to maintain media ethics standards and to ensure that content does not promote or involve serious criminal behavior. This move not only harmed Rick's personal image, but also had a direct impact on those who had worked with him on the show, including his son, Corey Harrison, and his longtime companion, Austin Chumley Russell. Before the incident, Pawn Stars had been regarded as one of the most successful reality shows on the History Channel with over 20 seasons aired, translated into multiple languages, and distributed in more than 150 countries. The cancellation of the show led to the cancellation of existing contracts with many media partners, sponsors, and commercial licensing systems, resulting in significant financial and reputational losses. From a business perspective, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, which had been a popular destination in Las Vegas, experienced a sharp decline in foot traffic in the 3 months following the sentencing. According to reports from the Nevada Tourism Department, the number of visitors to the area around the pawn shop dropped by 62% compared to the same period the previous year. The decline was attributed to public hesitation and the disruption in media coverage, as well as the severe damage to the shop's brand image. Corey Harrison, Rick's son, represented the family in holding a press conference to announce that the store would continue its operations with a commitment to transparency, legal compliance, and separation from his father's illegal actions. Corey also revealed plans to overhaul the pricing and appraisal system, collaborating with independent certifying organizations to regain customer trust. Rick Harrison's life sentence has sparked intense debate within the fan community and among viewers of Pawn Stars. While some expressed disappointment and condemned his criminal actions, believing the sentence was a clear demonstration of justice, others felt the punishment was too harsh, especially given that Rick had no involvement in violent crimes. The Hearts for Harrison movement began spreading across social media platforms, calling for sympathy and urging a reconsideration of the sentence. In just 2 weeks, the campaign attracted over 100,000 signatures on Change.org, accompanied by numerous comments from self-identified longtime fans of the show. Some argued that Rick Harrison had made valuable contributions to educating the public about history and culture, and that he deserved the chance for a lighter sentence or rehabilitation. On the contrary, heritage protection organizations and several archaeologists have voiced their support for the court's decision. A representative from the International Council for the Conservation of Heritage, ICHC, stated, "The sentence for Mr. Rick Harrison is not only a deterrent, but also carries symbolic value, condemning the uncontrolled commercialization of antiques, a phenomenon that is increasingly spreading globally." Some media commentators observed that the public's contrasting reactions clearly reflect the conflict between the personal image built through television shows and the complex legal realities of the case. This also raises an important question about the role of the media in creating heroes and hiding flaws in the eyes of the public. Rick Harrison had once been praised as a quintessential American entrepreneurial figure, someone without a college degree who taught himself through books and built a television empire from a small pawn shop. Through the show Pawn Stars, he helped promote the collecting of antiques, raised historical awareness, and provided both entertainment and educational value to the public. However, with the conviction and accusations related to the trading of antiques with unclear provenance, these achievements are now being reassessed. Historians, education experts, and media specialists have begun to reanalyze the content of the show from a different perspective. Does the valuation of artifacts on Pawn Stars truly reflect reality? Or is it simply a tool for commercialization disguised as education? Several earlier episodes, in which Rick purchased items with unclear origins or made comments that could easily be misleading about historical value, have been removed from international distribution platforms. Some schools and educational institutions that had used Pawn Stars as teaching material have also announced they will stop using the show, citing a lack of academic neutrality. On the family side, Corey Harrison is currently shouldering the responsibility of maintaining the business and protecting what remains of his father's image. Corey has declared that the pawn shop will return to its core values: transparency, thorough appraisals, and collaboration with conservation organizations to ensure that transactions comply with the law. Despite some positive signs from Corey's efforts and the remaining staff, the reality shows that the Rick Harrison brand is unlikely to recover in the near future. The licensing contracts and restaurant chains that once bore his name have been closed or renamed to distance themselves from his image. Rick's re-entry into television or the antiques business seems almost impossible without a significant legal breakthrough. 4. Efforts to overcome adversity. Despite being held in a strict prison environment, Rick Harrison has made an effort to participate in various activities aimed at correcting his behavior and preparing for eventual reintegration into society, as much as his circumstances allow. At the same time, his family and a loyal group of fans have continued to take specific actions to support him emotionally and preserve the positive image he once had before the incident occurred. Rick's family, especially his son, Corey Harrison, has played a key role in maintaining his connection with the outside world. Since the verdict was handed down, Corey has actively engaged with the media, held press conferences, and urged the public to view Rick Harrison as a whole person, rather than judging him solely by the mistakes recognized by the court. Corey also regularly visits the prison where Rick is serving his sentence. Within the guidelines of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the family is allowed to send letters, photographs, and certain non-prohibited personal items, which help Rick stay mentally strong and feel less isolated. In addition, the Hearts for Harrison movement, initiated by the fan community, continues to maintain a presence on social media platforms. Supporters frequently share uplifting messages, post memories tied to Pawn Stars, and call on the public to reconsider Rick's sentencing from a more humanitarian and educational perspective. Some fans have even organized weekend prayer gatherings outside the prison grounds. Although these events are not large in scale, Rick's family sees them as a meaningful source of encouragement. Furthermore, small packages, such as handwritten letters, drawings, or keepsake photos, are regularly sent to the facility by fans, most of which are collected and delivered by Corey himself. Beyond receiving external support, Rick Harrison has shown noticeable changes in his behavior and attitude during his incarceration. According to prison staff and internal reports, Rick has actively taken part in cognitive rehabilitation programs, soft skills training, and general education courses for inmates. Of particular note is Rick's enrollment as a part-time instructor for internal skills classes at the prison, specifically covering topics like personal financial management, product valuation, and negotiation skills. Drawing from his real-world experience, he has been able to effectively teach these foundational subjects to new inmates or those seeking to improve their job readiness post-release. This teaching role has been positively received by prison administrators. Rick consistently follows protocol, prepares his lessons thoroughly, and willingly shares knowledge without arrogance or disruption. As a result, his work schedule has been adjusted to allow a balanced combination of teaching and regular prison labor. Besides teaching, Rick is also involved in a psychological support group for long-term inmates, a program led by BOP psychologists designed to help prisoners cope with stress, prevent depression, and maintain a positive outlook. During these group sessions, Rick has the opportunity to listen to other inmates' stories and is encouraged to share his own journey of self-awareness and personal growth. A psychological counselor shared, "Rick Harrison is someone who has a clear sense of personal responsibility. He doesn't deny his mistakes and is making efforts to atone by passing on his life experiences and professional knowledge." During this period, Rick also began keeping a personal journal. Some excerpts released by his family with the prison's approval reflect a shift in his perspective and a re-evaluation of his past life. He focuses on topics such as ethical boundaries in business, pressure from public opinion, and how fame has influenced his poor decisions. Alongside his rehabilitation efforts in prison, Rick's family continues to pursue the appeals process in hopes of reducing his sentence. His attorney stated that a petition has been submitted to the Regional Federal Appellate Court, arguing that a life sentence is disproportionate for a non-violent offense. The appeal file cites several points in Rick's favor, including his cooperation with investigators, a clean criminal record prior to the case, meaningful contributions to society through an educational television program, and his current active participation in rehabilitation. However, up to this point, the court has not issued a final decision. Some international human rights organizations have also expressed concern over the case and have called for a review of humanitarian factors in the sentencing process. Although no specific legal action has been taken yet, these developments suggest the potential for future legal advocacy or public campaigns aimed at having the sentence reevaluated. 5. Why did Rick Harrison end up in this situation? Rick Harrison's life sentence not only sent shockwaves through the media, but also raised serious questions about professional ethics, business management, and the influence of fame in today's society. Below are the main factors believed to have contributed to his dramatic downfall. Rick Harrison came from a modest background, self-educated, and built his reputation starting from his family's pawn shop in Las Vegas. His success largely stemmed from his accurate appraisal skills, deep knowledge of history, and ability to present information in an engaging way. However, the expansion of his business and the explosive fame brought by Pawn Stars led to a series of high-risk decisions. One specific issue highlighted was the lack of legal oversight in transactions involving antiquities. Although Rick had a solid background in historical artifacts, his failure to establish a strict verification system for provenance resulted in many items bought and sold through the shop being linked to thefts or international smuggling operations. In addition, his financial and accounting decisions, particularly the use of a double bookkeeping system, indicated a deliberate effort to evade taxes and avoid audits. These weren't accidental missteps, but rather systematic actions carried out over several years. While Rick wasn't charged with any violent crime or direct fraud, his tax evasion and violations of antiquities trade laws were considered intentional and seriously damaging. Rick Harrison wasn't just a businessman. He was also a well-known television personality and public figure. The success of Pawn Stars crafted an almost flawless image of him, intelligent, knowledgeable, sharp, and professionally ethical. Yet with fame came the pressure to maintain that image, keep the content engaging for viewers, and sustain revenue streams for an entire media ecosystem, from the TV network to brand sponsors. The constant need to feature unique and rare items for filming and entertainment value may have led Rick to accept merchandise from less thoroughly vetted sources. In addition, expanding the brand from the food industry to book publishing, souvenirs, and real estate investment requires substantial capital, which can easily lead to significant financial pressure. In such a context, prioritizing short-term gains may lead to compromises with professional ethical standards. As business operations become more diversified and move beyond traditional industries, internal oversight systems gradually weaken, increasing the likelihood of mistakes or intentional violations of the law. The trade in artifacts, especially antiques, cultural relics, and collectibles, has long existed within a legal gray area, with inconsistent regulations across countries. Verifying the legal origin of an artifact requires a cross-sector inspection system, while many transactions still rely on verbal assurances or unclear documentation. Rick Harrison operates in a field where the line between legal and illegal is extremely thin. The absence of an independent verification system at the time of transaction, combined with the complexities of the artifact supply chain, significantly heightens the risk of legal breaches. Rick's case is seen as a notable example in the global effort to tighten control over the artifact market, a market in which many individuals and organizations have exploited loopholes to legitimize cultural assets of illicit origin. Rick Harrison's situation raises questions about the boundary between personal ethics and legal accountability in business practices. Although he was not directly involved in smuggling artifacts, his role as an operator and beneficiary of the system places him as the one chiefly responsible for establishing, enabling, and maintaining a flawed mechanism. The lesson from this case is clear. No matter how prominent a reputation may be, it cannot shield an individual from the consequences of abusing power or neglecting oversight. In today's media-driven world, where public image can be built and shattered in an instant, maintaining professional ethics and complying with the law is essential for long-term sustainability. 6. What does the future hold for Rick Harrison? It once seemed that Rick Harrison's future was permanently confined within the concrete walls of a federal prison. However, in reality, the concept of a life sentence in the U.S. legal system still allows for a few limited avenues, for those seeking sentence reductions, retrials, or transfers to different facilities. The question remains, does Rick Harrison still have any chance to start over, or at the very least, to improve his current circumstances? Rick's legal team has filed at least 2 appeals with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that a life sentence is disproportionate to the non-violent nature of his offense and fails to take into account his prior contributions to society before committing the crime. Still, according to data from the U.S. Department of Justice, only about 3% of federal life sentence appeals were granted sentence reductions or reclassifications between 2012 and 2022. Beyond appeals, Rick may also apply for a presidential pardon or seek a commutation. These are special forms of clemency granted solely at the discretion of the president and do not require congressional approval. That said, the chances of success are typically very slim, especially in cases that involve cultural heritage crimes, since such cases are often viewed as highly serious and socially sensitive. In the past 20 years, no case involving large-scale international antiquities smuggling has ever been granted presidential clemency. Another factor that could influence Rick's future is his rehabilitation efforts and the development of a positive inmate record. At present, Rick is informally involved in an internal education program where he helps fellow inmates gain financial literacy, life skills, and tools for reintegration into society. These efforts contribute to building a positive inmate profile, a crucial requirement for any future requests for sentence reduction or facility transfer. According to Federal Bureau of Prisons (BOP) regulations, after serving 15 years, inmates with life sentences may be eligible for transfer to a low-security facility, provided they have no major disciplinary violations, demonstrate consistent rehabilitation, and show significant health deterioration. While this doesn't mean release, it could offer Rick a more manageable living environment and access to end-of-life humanitarian programs. Rick Harrison will turn 60 in 2025, and according to publicly available medical records, he has a history of epilepsy, was hospitalized multiple times in his youth, and is currently on a regular regimen of anti-seizure medication. The federal prison system allows for compassionate release in cases of severe medical conditions, or if the inmate is deemed no longer a danger to the community. This policy applies to special situations such as terminal illness, serious cognitive decline, or an inability to care for oneself. However, according to the latest regulations issued by the BOP and the U.S. Department of Justice in 2023, epilepsy is not considered a sufficiently compelling reason to grant humanitarian clemency, unless there are severe complications that affect the nervous system or impair independent living. Given Rick's current condition, stable health, continued involvement in labor and teaching, the likelihood of qualifying for this policy is extremely low, at least for the next 5 years. Although he no longer has the opportunity to return to the television industry or commercialize his personal image, the name Rick Harrison still holds a certain level of interest within a loyal fan community. Online campaigns such as Hearts for Harrison remain active, attracting tens of thousands of interactions each month and consistently advocating for a review of his sentence. At present, his son, Corey Harrison, is the sole public representative of the family and has resumed management of the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas. Corey once stated that he won't let everything fall apart because of one mistake his father made, and has implemented an independent verification process, established partnerships with local museums, and refused to trade items with unclear origins. That said, the chances of reviving the Pawn Stars brand or bringing Rick back into the public eye are virtually non-existent. His name has been removed from most media databases, international distribution platforms have discontinued airing the show, and the reality TV industry in the US now tends to completely distance itself from individuals with serious criminal records. In theory, Rick Harrison could maintain a model record of rehabilitation over the next 10 to 15 years and submit a second request for sentence reduction once he reaches the age of 75. Should there be changes in federal judicial policy, such as reforms related to nonviolent offenses, he could be among those eligible for reconsideration. One factor that could support this possibility is the trend toward reduced sentencing for financial crimes that began under the U.S. presidential administration of 2030, if approved by Congress. Nevertheless, it's important to emphasize that none of these possibilities guarantee freedom or a return to normal life. Due to the nature of the case, involving cultural heritage, international reach, and spanning several years, Rick Harrison will remain under strict supervision, whether still in custody or if granted clemency in the future. Rick Harrison's case stands as a prime example of a modern-day tragedy, where fame, accomplishments, and public support are still not enough to shield an individual from the legal consequences of their mistakes. From a successful entrepreneur and prominent television personality to a prisoner serving a life sentence, Rick's journey clearly illustrates the dark side of lacking ethical control in business, especially when commercial activities involve cultural heritage and historically valuable assets. Life behind bars for Rick Harrison is not only a personal price to pay, but it also has long-lasting effects on his family, his fan base, and the entire reality TV industry. A series of consequences, from the cancellation of Pawn Stars, the collapse of his personal brand, to the growing divide in public opinion, reveals a truth. Public image cannot replace legal accountability or professional ethics. This story is not just the downfall of a television figure. It serves as a wake-up call to entrepreneurs and public figures alike about the importance of maintaining a clear boundary between legitimate success and exploiting public trust. And in the end, one major question still remains. Can society forgive and offer Rick Harrison, or anyone who has taken the wrong path, a chance to make amends and start over? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next shocking behind-the-scenes story.